The attack. The sky over New Horizon was a brilliant shade of blue, just like Earth's. Children played in the fields, scientists worked in their labs, and workers built new homes for the ever-growing colony. It had been 20 years since humans first settled here. It was a peaceful place. Safe. Until the sky turned red. At first, people thought it was just a storm, strange but harmless. Then the alarms blared. Radar stations picked up massive, unidentified ships entering orbit. The colony's defense systems activated, but they were weak compared to what was coming. The first strike was brutal. The sci-fi, an unknown alien race, attacked without warning. Massive energy blasts rained down from the sky, obliterating buildings and vaporizing entire city blocks. The colony's small fleet launched from the ground, but the alien ships cut through them like paper. Fighters burned in the sky, crashing into homes and factories. Governor Elias Carter watched from the control center, his face pale. "Send a distress signal to Earth," he ordered. "We're trying." A technician shouted. "They're jamming us." The control room shook as another blast hit the colony's shield generators. Sparks flew. Screens flickered. A transmission came through, an alien face, cold and expressionless. "Humans, you are weak. This colony is ours now. You were warned." The message cut off. The attack continued. The colony's remaining defenses tried to fight back. Automated railguns fired at the alien ships, managing to take down a few smaller vessels. But the sci-fi had numbers. Too many. They swarmed the colony like locusts, destroying everything in their path. People ran through the streets, screaming. Parents carried their children, desperate to find shelter. But there was no safe place. Soldiers tried to hold the main roads, setting up barricades, but the enemy was relentless. Sci-fi troops landed on the ground, tall creatures with metallic armor and glowing eyes. They moved in perfect formation, killing without mercy. Commander Sarah Briggs, leader of the colony's security force, knew they were doomed, but she wouldn't go down without a fight. "Hold the line," she shouted, firing her rifle at the advancing aliens. Her team fought bravely, but they were outgunned. One by one, they fell. Briggs saw a sci-fi warrior raise its weapon toward a group of civilians. She charged, tackling the alien to the ground and stabbing it in the neck with her combat knife. The creature let out a strange, choking sound before going still. But there were too many. The control center took a direct hit. Fire and smoke filled the air. Governor Carter barely made it out before the entire structure collapsed. He coughed, looking at the burning ruins of the city. "This isn't just an attack," he whispered. "This is extermination." Then he saw the communications tower, damaged, but still standing. If they could send a single message to Earth, maybe there was hope. Briggs ran up beside him. "Governor, we need to get out of here." "No," he said. "We have to warn them." Together, they sprinted toward the tower. Sci-fi soldiers saw them and opened fire. Plasma blasts scorched the ground around them. A young soldier, barely out of training, took a hit and collapsed, screaming. But there was no time to help. Briggs and Carter reached the tower. The main control panel was destroyed, but Carter activated the emergency transmitter. It flickered to life. "This is Governor Elias Carter of New Horizon Colony. We are under attack by an unknown alien force. The colony is lost. I repeat, the colony is lost. If anyone hears this..." A sci-fi gunship fired. The tower exploded. The last thing Carter saw was the sky, once blue, now filled with fire. Far away, deep in space, a small relay station picked up a weak signal. The message was broken, filled with static, but one thing was clear. Earth had received the distress call, and Earth was coming. The message had barely survived the journey. Static-filled, broken, but unmistakable. The last words of New Horizon. On Earth, in the heart of the United Earth Fleet headquarters, Admiral Alexander Kane listened in silence. The transmission repeated on the massive screen before him. distorted images of burning cities, screaming civilians, and the cold alien voice that had dared to mock humanity. Humans, you are weak. This colony is ours now. Kane's hands clenched into fists. Weak? The Kyphor had made a mistake that would cost them everything. He turned to his officers, his voice calm but filled with steel. How long until the fleet is ready? Most ships are already on standby, sir, but to mobilize everything. Then we mobilize everything, Kane interrupted. I want every warship fueled, every weapon loaded. We're not just sending a response. His eyes burned with fury. We're sending a message. The call to war. The war order spread across the solar system like wildfire. On Luna Base, the shipyards roared to life. Massive dreadnoughts, each the size of a city, powered up their reactors. Thousands of workers raced to arm them with kinetic railguns, plasma cannons, and the new experimental gravhammer warheads, designed to collapse entire enemy fleets in a single detonation. On Mars, the Red Planet's vast military academies sent out deployment orders. Pilots, Marines, engineers, everyone who could fight was called to arms. The infamous Titan Brigade, Earth's deadliest shock troopers, readied for battle. On Jupiter's moons, deep space carriers prepared their squadrons. Thousands of AI-controlled drones were armed with adaptive combat algorithms. They could predict enemy movements before they happened. Everywhere, the same word spread. Humanity is going to war. The heart of the fleet. A week later, Earth's full military might gathered in high orbit. It was the largest armada in human history, over 3,000 warships, ranging from nimble corvettes to massive supercarriers. At the center of it all was UES Vengeance, Kane's flagship, a monstrous dreadnought, bristling with weapons, built for one purpose: annihilation. Kane stood on the bridge, staring at the battle map. Do we have intel on the enemy fleet size? Vice Admiral Patel shook her head. Not enough, sir. We only know one thing. They're organized, advanced, and they think we're easy prey. Kane smirked. Then they don't know what humans do when we get angry. The fleet's AI confirmed all ships were online. Engines flared, weapons locked into position. Kane turned to his crew. Set course for the New Horizon system. Maximum speed. A second of silence. Then, Aye, Admiral. Jumping now. A deep hum filled the ship as the fleet activated their slipstream drives. Reality twisted. The stars blurred. The largest war fleet in human history vanished into the void, heading straight for vengeance. The Cyphor homeworld. Far away, deep in the Typhor Empire, the alien warlords sat in their council chambers. They watched recordings of the colony's destruction with amusement. The humans were weaker than expected, one of them said. Their fleets are scattered. They will not retaliate, another added. Then, a new message arrived. A scout ship, stationed near human space, had intercepted something disturbing. A human fleet. Massive. Advancing toward Cyphor territory at impossible speed. For the first time in centuries, the Cyphor Council fell silent. They had expected fear. They had expected surrender. Instead, humanity was coming for war. The void of space was silent. But the fleet moved like a storm. 3,000 warships, armed to the teeth, cutting through the blackness with deadly precision. Battleships, cruisers, and carriers traveled in perfect formation, their engines glowing like burning suns. Escort ships scouted ahead, scanning for any sign of the enemy. Humanity was on the hunt. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, staring at the holographic display. The New Horizon system was just ahead, now nothing more than scorched ruins. They had already received sensor readings, no signs of human life. Too late to save them. Not too late to avenge them. Any movement? Kane asked. Nothing yet. Admiral, Vice Admiral Patel replied. But our long-range scanners picked up energy signatures on the outer rim. Could be wreckage. Could be something else. Kane narrowed his eyes. Send in the recon squads. If there's something there, I want to know what. Ghosts in the dark. 2 sleek recon ships, Shadow 1 and Shadow 2, glided silently through the asteroid belt at the system's edge. Their stealth technology made them nearly invisible, running with minimal power to avoid detection. Lieutenant Marcus Vale, piloting Shadow 1, checked his scanners, reading multiple objects ahead. Wreckage. Some human, some unknown. Copy that, came Shadow 2's reply. Wait. I got something. Movement at bearing 112 Mark 5. Vale adjusted his sensors. A faint signature flickered on his screen. A ship. Small, drifting, almost dead. But it wasn't human. That's an enemy scout, Vale muttered. Looks like they're trying to play dead. He switched to encrypted fleet comms. Shadow 1 to command. We've got an enemy survivor, possibly gathering intel. Orders. On the Vengeance, Admiral Kane didn't hesitate. Take it alive. Vale exhaled. Understood. Moving in. Shadow 1 and Shadow 2 approached the enemy ship carefully. Pulse weapons charged. The alien vessel remained still, playing dead. But as they got closer, it suddenly powered up and tried to flee. Too late. A precision shot from Shadow 2 disabled its engines. The ship spun helplessly in space. Human Marines launched from a nearby cruiser, boarding the alien vessel within minutes. 10 minutes later, the Marines sent a chilling message back to Kane. Admiral, you need to see this. The interrogation. The captured cipher was dragged into a reinforced interrogation chamber aboard the Vengeance. The creature was tall, its metallic armor covered in strange glowing patterns. Its 4 glowing eyes scanned the room, its mandibles clicking in defiance. Admiral Kane stepped inside, his cold gaze meeting the aliens. You slaughtered an innocent colony. No warning, no mercy. His voice was like iron. You will tell me everything. The Typhor warrior hissed, baring its fangs. Humans do not frighten us. Your people were weak. Their deaths were necessary. Kane's fist clenched. We are not weak. He leaned in, his voice dangerously low. We found your fleet's trail. We're following it. You can either help us, or watch your empire burn. The Typhor let out a sound that might have been laughter. You are too late. We have already planned your end. Kane's eyes narrowed. Explain. The alien's mandibles twitched. You think you are hunting us, but we are leading you into the slaughter. A cold silence filled the room. Kane turned to Patel. Get our fleet on high alert. Now. The discovery. The fleet pressed forward, following the enemy's trail. The wreckage led them deeper into Cypher space. Days passed. Scouting teams reported abandoned outposts, destroyed satellites. It was as if the Cypher wanted them to find these things. Then, they'd reached the Haven system. At first, it looked deserted. But long-range scans picked up something hidden behind the system's gas giant. A fleet. Not just a fleet. A trap. Thousands of Cypher warships powered up all at once. Waiting. Ready. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Kane stared at the enemy force. They've been expecting us. Patil swallowed. We're outnumbered 5-1. Kane exhaled slowly, a dangerous glint in his eyes. Good. The crew stared at him. Yes, sir, Patil asked. If they're all here, Kane said, it means we don't have to hunt them down. A smirk crossed his face. They walked right into our trap. The Haven system was silent. An unnatural, eerie silence. The United Earth Fleet had come expecting a battle, but they hadn't expected this. From the bridge of the UES Vengeance, Admiral Kane surveyed the battlefield through the ship's reinforced viewport. The Cypher fleet hung in the darkness ahead. Thousands of warships, their sharp, angular hulls reflecting the dim light of the system's sun. They weren't moving. Not yet. They're waiting for something, Vice Admiral Patel muttered. Kane didn't respond immediately. He was watching the formations, running calculations in his mind. The Xyphor weren't just throwing ships at them in a chaotic assault. No, this was a carefully orchestrated kill box. They had been led here deliberately. And that meant that Xyphor thought they had already won. Kane's lips curled into a dangerous smirk. Fools. The ambush springs. Then it began. Without warning, dozens of enemy ships burst out from the shadows of the gas giant, their hulls painted with adaptive camouflage that had hidden them from sensors. Plasma lances streaked through the void, slamming into the outer layers of the human fleet. A dozen human destroyers vanished in fire. The Xyphor fleet surged forward. Thousands of ships, moving with terrifying coordination, forming an unbreakable wall of fire and death. They fired with perfect precision, targeting human ships' weak points, overwhelming the shields with focused bombardments. Inside the Vengeance, alarms blared. The tactical display lit up with flashing red markers. "They're jamming our comms," Patel shouted. "We're losing ships fast." Kane stayed calm, watching the battlefield with razor-sharp focus. "Good," he muttered. "Let them think we're panicking." Then he turned to his comm officer. "Activate the fail-safe protocol. Now." Humanity's counterattack. A signal pulsed through the fleet, a brief, coded transmission that only eye-controlled subsystems could read. For a moment, the chaos continued. The Xyphor pressed forward, confident they were winning. Then everything changed. Suddenly, human ships stopped retreating. They shifted positions with eerie precision, like pieces of a puzzle snapping into place. Hidden compartments opened along their hulls, revealing gravhammer warheads, weapons too powerful to use in normal combat. Then, in perfect synchronization, they fired. The gravhammer warheads detonated in the heart of the Xyphor fleet, creating miniature black holes. Hundreds of enemy ships were pulled into the void, crushed under their own weight. But humanity wasn't done. Across the battlefield, hundreds of drone carriers decloaked, releasing swarms of eye-controlled fighters, each one equipped with learning algorithms that adapted to enemy movements in real time. The Xyphor, used to fighting predictable opponents, suddenly found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. And then, the Titan Brigade dropped. The Titans arrive. From the largest human carriers, drop pods rained down onto the enemy's capital ships. These weren't ordinary soldiers. These were the Titan Brigade, humanity's deadliest warriors, clad in power armor capable of surviving in space. They landed on enemy hulls, cut through their armor with plasma torches, and stormed the interiors. One by one, Xyphor warships fell from within. The turning point. The Xyphor had believed they had lured humanity into a trap, but now they were the ones trapped. Their formations crumbled, their capital ships detonated, their fighters were torn apart by AI squadrons. And at the center of it all, Admiral Kane watched with cold satisfaction. "They thought they knew war," he said quietly. "They don't know us." The battle wasn't over yet, but the tide had turned, and humanity was winning. The battlefield burns. Space was no longer silent. It was a graveyard of fire and metal. The once proud Xyphor fleet was collapsing. Wreckage floated through the void. Twisted remains of warships that had stood for centuries. Humanity's counterattack had shattered their formations, and now they were fighting a war they were no longer prepared for. But the Xyphor were not beaten yet. Their dreadnoughts, the monstrous warships that anchored their fleet, still stood. Each one was a moving fortress, layered in plasma-resistant armor, armed with weapons powerful enough to crack planets. And now, these behemoths were turning their guns toward the human fleet. A final stand. Inside the UES Vengeance, Admiral Kane watched the shifting battle map. He knew what was coming. "Their heavy hitters are online," Vice Admiral Patel warned. "If those dreadnoughts open fire at full capacity, they won't get the chance." Kane interrupted. His voice was calm, cold. "We take them down first." Patel swallowed. "Sir, Those ships are practically invincible. Even our gravhammer warheads barely scratch their hulls. Kane turned to the communications officer. Patch me through to the Titan Brigade. Now. Storming the dreadnoughts. Aboard the sci-fi flagship, the massive warship known as Imperium Wrath, Supreme Commander Viruk watched the battle unfold with growing horror. This was not how it was supposed to go. Humans were supposed to break. They were supposed to fear. But they did neither. Instead, they fought harder, smarter, more brutally than the sci-fi had ever expected. Then, Viruk saw something that turned his blood to ice. Hundreds of human drop pods were streaking toward the dreadnoughts. And leading them was the Titan Brigade. The gods of war. The Titan Brigade was not an army. It was a force of nature. They landed on the Typhor dreadnoughts with explosive force, smashing through outer armor and breaching the hulls like a swarm of living missiles. Their exosuits absorbed the shock, their weapons charged and ready. Then, they tore through the enemy like an unstoppable wave. Inside Imperium Wrath, sci-fi warriors formed defensive lines, aiming their weapons at the blast doors. They were ready, or so they thought. The doors didn't just open. They exploded. And through the smoke and fire, the Titans emerged. Towering in mechanized armor, their visors glowing with combat interfaces, their weapons built to destroy anything in their path. Some wielded massive shock hammers, capable of crushing enemy bodies with a single swing. Others carried mag-rail miniguns, firing superheated projectiles that tore through walls like paper. Commander Darius Kane, leader of the Titan Brigade, stepped forward. His armor was marked with battle scars, his voice calm as he spoke through his helmet speakers. You wanted a war. He raised his plasma blade, the burning weapon humming with lethal energy. You've got one. Then the Titans charge. The sci-fi never stood a chance. Admiral Kane's final move. Back on the Vengeance, Admiral Kane watched the Titan Brigade's assault from his command interface. They were cutting through the enemy dreadnoughts like a virus, disabling power cores, sabotaging weapons, and slaughtering crew members with terrifying efficiency. But Kane knew that wasn't enough. The Typhor fleet still had numbers. If even one of those dreadnoughts managed to regroup, the battle could turn against them again. They needed a killing blow. Prepare the apocalypse cannon, Kane ordered. The bridge went silent. Patil turned to him, eyes wide. Sir, are you sure? She asked. That weapon is still experimental. We've never fired it in real combat. Kane's expression remained stone cold. We fire it today. The weapon of extinction. The apocalypse cannon was Earth's deadliest creation, a superweapon designed to unravel matter itself. Its energy output was so dangerous that it had only been tested once, in deep space, far from any planetary system. Now, it was aimed directly at the Cypher's strongest warships. The countdown began. 5. The cannon's core hummed, absorbing energy from the ship's reactors. 4. The Typhor fleet realized what was happening. Their ships began breaking formation, trying to retreat. 3. Kane leaned forward, his voice like a death sentence. Too late. 2. The Cypher dreadnoughts tried to fire their weapons, but inside their hulls, the Titan Brigade was already shutting them down. 1. Kane gave the order. Fire. The end of the battle. A pillar of white-hot energy erupted from the Vengeance, cutting through space like a blade of pure destruction. The apocalypse cannon's beam struck the Imperium Wrath first. It didn't just explode. It collapsed in on itself, its atoms tearing apart at the molecular level. A shockwave of annihilation followed, consuming every Cypher warship within range. Hundreds of enemy vessels were erased from existence in an instant. The remaining Cypher ships panicked. They tried to flee, but humanity did not forgive. The remaining warships of the United Earth Fleet hunted them down, one by one. Within an hour, the once mighty Cypher armada had been reduced to ashes. Aftermath. As the battlefield settled, Kane stood in silence, staring at the wreckage of what had once been an invincible alien fleet. Humanity had won, but he knew this was only the beginning. Patil approached him. "Sir, orders." Kane exhaled slowly. Then he turned to his officers and spoke the words that would change the course of history forever. "We're not stopping here." His voice was cold, unyielding. "Set course for the Typhor homeworld." He narrowed his eyes. "We're taking the fight to them." The fleet that shook the stars. The battle was over. The enemy fleet lay in ruins, but Admiral Alexander Kane was not done. The United Earth Fleet, bloodied but victorious, gathered in formation above the wreckage of the Haven system. The Typhor had drawn them into a trap and had been annihilated for their arrogance. Now, humanity was taking the war to their doorstep. A message was broadcast across every ship in the fleet. Kane's voice echoed through the comm channels, reaching every soldier, every pilot, every crew member. "We came here seeking vengeance for New Horizon. We have found it. But this war does not end in a single battle. The Typhor sought to exterminate us. Now they will learn what it means to challenge humanity." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We go to their homeworld. We go to end them." The fleet roared in approval. Engines ignited. Warships realigned. The largest armada in human history turned toward the Typhor Empire. The hunt was not over. It had only just begun. The desperate Typhor. Far away, deep within Typhor space, the Supreme Council of the Empire gathered in a chamber of black stone and burning light. The air was thick with tension, the scent of fear unmistakable. Their fleet was gone. Their greatest dreadnoughts, their veteran warriors, all destroyed. And the humans, they were coming. Typhor High Commander Viruk stood before the council, his mandibles clicking in frustration. "We must deploy every remaining warship, every soldier. If we do not stop them at the homeworld, we are finished." A withered elder, his armor draped in ceremonial robes, shook his head. "You still do not understand, Viruk. The humans are different." Viruk's eyes burned with defiance. "They are still flesh and bone. They can be defeated." The elder's voice was cold. "Then why are they the ones advancing, while we cower in fear?" Silence. Viruk clenched his fists. "Then what do you propose?" The elder hesitated. Then, in a voice filled with reluctant desperation, he spoke words that had not been uttered in centuries. "We surrender." The council chamber erupted in outrage. Warriors hissed. Commanders slammed their fists on the stone tables. Viruk sneered. "You would have us grovel before the apes." The elder's eyes were weary. "I would have us survive." But before the debate could continue, an alarm blared across the chamber. A new message had arrived. A single, short transmission. It was from the United Earth Fleet. It contained one word: run. The final battle approaches. The Typhor had no choice now. Some wanted to flee. Some wanted to surrender. But the war faction, led by Viruk, refused. They would make their final stand. Across the Typhor Empire, the last of their forces gathered. Old warships were pulled from the depths of forgotten shipyards. The ancient world killer cannons, weapons so powerful they had been forbidden even by their own kind, were reactivated. The skies above the Typhor homeworld, Zyphar Prime, filled with the last remnants of their once mighty armada. They would fight. They would die. And humanity would watch them burn. The fleet arrives. The United Earth Fleet emerged from slip space like a storm. The vast armada of 3,000 warships had grown. Survivors from previous battles, reinforcements from Earth, even rogue mercenary fleets who had seen the writing on the wall and sided with the winning force. Now, over 5,000 warships filled the void above Zyphar Prime. Typhor defenses opened fire immediately. Planetary cannons, massive railgun turrets, anti-orbital missiles, all unleashed in a desperate attempt to keep the humans from reaching their world. But this was not the same humanity that Typhor had first encountered. This was a species evolved by war. The fleet moved with terrifying coordination. Every ship had a role. Every formation was precise. Eye-controlled drones intercepted planetary defenses before they could do damage. Shield formations absorbed the brunt of the assault, allowing heavy warships to return fire with planet-shaking force. The battle above Zyphar Prime had begun. And below, humanity was already preparing the invasion. The ground war begins. On the surface of Zyphar Prime, the Typhor military braced for impact. Then the sky fell. Thousands of drop pods, each carrying heavily armored shock troopers, rained down like a meteor storm. Titan brigade walkers descended from massive carriers, their legs crushing the earth beneath them. Exosuit infantry, enhanced with advanced cybernetics, stormed the enemy's defensive lines with terrifying speed. The Typhor fought back with everything they had. But humanity had come to conquer. They had spent decades refining their orbital drop strategies. Their soldiers were equipped with adaptive AI targeting, making them lethal in close combat. They never stopped. For every human that fell, 100 Cyphor were cut down. For every defensive line that Cyphor held, humanity shattered 2 more. For every moment that Cyphor clung to hope, humanity stole it away. Admiral Kane's final demand. In the heart of the burning capital, Supreme Commander Viruk stood in the last surviving Cyphor stronghold. He watched the battlefield on a holomap, his claws gripping the table so tightly that the metal bent under the pressure. The war was over. Human forces had breached the palace. The once mighty Cyphor Empire, the great dominators of the void, were now nothing more than prey before a predator. Then his comm device buzzed. A direct transmission. The humans. Viruk hesitated, then accepted the call. Admiral Kane appeared on the screen, his expression devoid of emotion. His fleet loomed in the background, unscared, untouched, as if they had merely been playing this whole time. "You lost," Kane said simply. Viruk's mandibles twitched. "You think this is victory?" he hissed. "We will fight to the last breath." Kane leaned forward. "You mistake me, Commander. This isn't about your last breath." He let the words sink in. "This is about the last breath of your species." Viruk's blood turned to ice. Kane continued, his voice low and merciless. "You invaded our world. You murdered our people. And now, you have one chance to surrender. One. No negotiations, no treaties. You either bow, or we erase your empire from existence." Viruk was silent. The weight of extinction pressed down on him. Then, he made his choice: surrender or extinction. Supreme Commander Viruk stood in the ruined war chamber, his claws tightening around the edges of the holotable. Across from him, the cold and unyielding face of Admiral Kane flickered on the communication screen. The words still echoed in Viruk's mind. "You either bow, or we erase your empire from existence." Outside, Zyphar Prime was burning. Human warships dominated the skies, their firepower overwhelming every remaining defense. On the ground, human forces pushed deeper into the Cyphor capital, unstoppable, like the wrath of the universe itself. Viruk turned to his war council. Half of them were dead. The rest were wounded, exhausted, and broken. Some warriors wanted to fight to the last. Others wanted to flee. And a few had finally realized the truth. The Typhor were finished. Viruk clenched his fists. He had spent his life believing in Typhor's superiority. He had led countless campaigns, conquered entire species, crushed civilizations under his command. But he had never faced anything like this. The humans were not just another species. They were something else, something worse. "We will never surrender," one of the younger commanders growled. Viruk turned toward him. Then he shot him in the head. The chamber fell silent. The Supreme Commander placed his weapon on the table and stared at Kane. "What are your terms?" Kane exhaled slowly, then spoke the words that would decide the fate of an entire species. The price of survival. There would be no treaties, no negotiations, no mercy, Kane's terms were simple. The Sci-Fi Empire ceases to exist. Every surviving Sci-Fi fleet is to be surrendered immediately. Sci-Fi Prime is no longer theirs. Humanity would take it. The Sci-Fi would never hold a military again. Ever. And the final demand, the one that sent a cold chill through the room. The Supreme Commander must publicly kneel before the United Earth Fleet and surrender in front of the entire galaxy. Varrock felt his pride shatter. He had once stood above the weak, crushing them beneath his feet. Now he was being forced to kneel before the very species he had tried to exterminate. He wanted to refuse. He wanted to fight. But when he looked at the holomap, he knew there was no empire left to fight for. His mandibles tightened. We accept. The war was over. The broadcast that shook the galaxy. The surrender was broadcasted across every major communication channel in the known universe. Every species that had ever feared the X-4 watched. The Supreme Commander of what was once the most feared empire in the galaxy knelt before the United Earth Fleet. His warriors stood behind him, their weapons discarded, their eyes filled with shame and fear. And before him stood Admiral Kane, his presence looming like an executioner's shadow. Kane didn't speak at first. He simply watched. Then, finally, he leaned forward and spoke the words that echoed across the galaxy. Now you understand. The Sci-Fi, once conquerors, were now nothing more than a footnote in human history. The galaxy had changed. Forever. Sci-Fi Prime. Humanity's new throne. The Sci-Fi homeworld was no longer theirs. It was now a human colony. Sci-Fi Prime was renamed New Horizon II, in honor of the colony that Sci-Fi had destroyed, the crime that had started this war. Sci-Fi survivors were relocated to isolated territories, stripped of their military, their status, their power. They were left with nothing. And humanity. Humanity ascended. The war had changed them. They were no longer just another player in the galactic stage. They were the dominant force. Every species watched with a mixture of awe, fear, and dread. Because now they knew. Humanity was not to be challenged. Not ever again. Admiral Kane's final words. As the last Sci-Fi war banners were burned, as the last of their leaders were taken into captivity, Admiral Kane stood at the highest tower of New Horizon II, looking down at the once great capital of the Sci-Fi. Patel stood beside him. "It's over," she said quietly. Kane didn't answer at first, because he knew the truth. This was only the beginning. Humanity had just proven itself as the greatest power in the galaxy. And that meant one thing. There would always be someone else who would try to take that power away. Kane narrowed his eyes, his voice cold and unshaken. If they ever forget what happened here. He looked up, watching the Earth fleet hovering in the sky. We will remind them.